Good morning, I'm Cody Henriksen. Today we're going to be talking about how we can use SwiftUI to read from JSON or JSON data file on our local app, and how we can use that to populate and use inside a list type component using the SwiftUI interface. So as you can see right here, I have a lovely section of JSON data that my students have created about different items that they want to put in their bucket list. And so we're going to be using this so we can have a way to sort through that and work with it. So we'll go ahead and we'll close out of this, and we'll go ahead and take a look at the model components, the things we're going to be using for to actually put this app together, what go on behind the scenes. So the first thing we have is our BucketListItem.Swift. So when we're talking about the bucket list items, this is the main component we're using to actually structure the pieces together. As you can see, it's simply just a quick little struct. The struct itself has two protocols that it conforms to. It conforms to both Codable and Identifiable. When we're talking about protocols, it means we have to do the things that are required for them. And so when we're talking about the Codable Protocol means that every component that's inside the struct or a class that we're working with needs to be something that can be converted into a way that can actually be read or turned into JSON data, which is going to be things like strings, ints, doubles, Boolean values are great, or arrays or lists or structures of thereof. And since everything we're working with right here is really simple and basic, like strings and ints, we're totally good and it's going to work automatically. The next thing we're looking at is the Identifiable Protocol. The Identifiable Protocol is where we can actually find information. And so in order to do that, we have to have a unique value called ID. Oh, look, we have a first var in there is called ID, and it's of type string. We're going to use an ID on this, and so the string that we're using for that is a unique value that has a random number followed by a sequentially generated string sequence, and then another random number at the end. So you can have a guaranteed little bit of thing. So it looks kind of like a UUID. If you wanted to go a lot more with that and creating an actual UUID, you could totally do that and make it even better. Then the year, the creature, and the goal are the different things that we're using inside the actual data set that we're working with. The year is the year of the student that we're talking about. The creature is the anonymous tool we're using. So I did a selection of different mythological creatures. And finally, the goal is the bucket list item that they want to accomplish. So those are the pieces we're using to actually put that stuff together. So we'll be working from that. If we would take a quick look again over here at the data set, you can see that we have the IDs, the years, goals, and creatures right here. So we have a 2018 section right here, getting above a 3.7 GPA with an Encantado, and then looking for a Thunderbird and making a Minecraft mod. So these are some of the things that some of the students I had in my class a couple years ago wanted to be able to do. And you can see right here with that sequential generation right here, those values are all going to be unique because we have that random number first, then the sequential generation value, and then finally another random number. Makes it really easy to work with. We'll go ahead and take a look next at our BucketData.Swift. The BucketData.Swift is how we're going to actually do the work with this. And so in BucketData, we have first our variable called BucketData. Actually, yeah, make sure we have the foundation showing on that. You do have to either import Foundation, SwiftUI, or UIKit, depending on which one you're working with to make that happen. The first one, though, is a variable called BucketData. As you can see right now, BucketData is in a list or an array of bucket list item objects, and we're going to assign that a value by calling the loadJSON from and then passing a string of the file name. So that's what we're going to work with it next. The loadJSON method is what we see right here. We have both an external and internal variable name. The from is external, so loadJSON from buckets. And then those are both strings, of course, because it's the same variable. And it returns, again, the bucket list item array. Inside that, we have to do some stuff to actually check to make sure we have access to it. The first piece, though, is our if-let. Again, an if-let is say, can I run this code and get something back from it? If I can, then cool, we'll go past it. And so if let data URL be bundle.main.url. So can I use the internal structure of my app? Can I find a URL for an internal file named file? I use a with extension nil because if you notice right up here when I call it on line 11, the buckets.json, it's bucket.json. So the extension is already put inside the file name, so I don't need to do anything special with that. That's why the nil is right here. Normally don't want to do anything with nil, but hey, we've got it there. The next piece we have is we're going to set let data to be a try force unwrapping a data conversion. Now, you should never, ever explicitly do a try exclamation point in anything that's going to be publicly released, because the try exclamation point, if it fails, the app's going to crash. But we wrote the data. It's ours. We know it's right there, so we're totally cool. If you're actually doing something that's going to retrieve it from the internet or something that's not necessarily guaranteed to be part of your actual app itself, never use the try exclamation point because, again, you want to have safe data on that. Again, we're going to make a decoder object on the next piece, so let decoder equal JSON decoder, so I'm going to decode that data, so I'm going to make an instance of that. And then I'm going to do this in two parts for a couple reasons. Inside the do block, I have to actually try something. I'm not sure it's going to guarantee work, so I have a do try inside there, and I catch the exception simply to print the error message, because I don't want my app to crash even if there's a problem. And then I'm going to say do let results equal try decoder.decode. So I'm going to try and actually decode that data file I just created right there with that force unwrap. I know it's going to work automatically because we wrote it, but again, we're going from there. And when I decode it, I want to see if I can turn it into an array list, or list, of bucket list items. And where am I going to get that from? The data set that we just created. So that's what the decoder.decode does, is like, can I actually grab that thing and retrieve it and turn it into an array list of bucket items? If I can, I'm going to store it in results. Now, I know I could simply return that, but I like having a variable because when I have something as a variable, I can always inspect it later on when I'm looking at debugging and trying to see if there's any problems or errors later on. So that's why I'm explicitly using the let results equal and then returning that results right there, because I can inspect the data a lot easier than simply just having the method calls build it itself and return it all at once. I do have my catch in case there's an error. Shouldn't happen because we've got good stuff and we're going on there. The last line right there of line 30 is a return array list of bucket list items creation. So I'm returning an empty list. This is a data load failure. This should only ever happen if everything crashes and burns, which we don't want it to happen anyway. So if we get an empty list, we know there's a problem. And so that's why I have data load failure as a comment on that. So again, this BucketData Swift file is a collection of both a variable and a method. Notice they're not inside a struct or a class or anything because these are just utility methods that exist so we can use them to load information. And that's why they're like that. So let's go ahead and let's go to our last one there, the bucket store. The bucket store in our model package is so I can have a single instance of that data store. So bucket store is a data store for bucket list items. I could do bucket list store, but we'll do a bucket store. Bucket store bucket store is going to conform to the observable object thing, aka I can look at it. I need to be able to look at the bucket store. Specifically, I need to look at the variable called buckets. Buckets is the thing that I'm going to reference, which is the array list of bucket items. And when I initialize it, I'm going to pass it an array list or a list of bucket list items as well, or a default array. We're not going to ever do that. So again, self.buckets equals buckets. So right there, now because this is a class, in Swift, a class is a single-time thing. I get one of them. And then so when I pass it, I pass a reference to that. So if you've been in my classes before when I'm talking about, say, for example, my coffee or my sriracha, if I let you have my coffee, which I'm not going to do, it would decrease my coffee. If I let you have some of my sriracha, of course that would share my sriracha level will decrease. And that's okay. But I have that reference to it. But when I pass a struct, I get copies of them. I don't want a whole bunch of copies of my data store. I only want one of them. And so that's why this is going to be a class, because it's a reference object. And there's only one that we want to use as we're working with this. So again, a quick little look at this. Inside the model group, we have those three things that we're working with. The bucket list item, which is or the actual struct that we're using to actually control the information. The bucket data, which has those helper methods we just looked at a minute ago. And the bucket store, which is the object, the instance we're using to keep as a data store, so I can refer to it back and forth inside my app rather than making multiple copies with a struct. Now, in order to use this information, we're going to go ahead and go to look at our controller thing and look at our data view, because the data view is where all that's going to happen. And so we're going to take a look at how we can actually make that happen and use it, and we'll go look at the demo for this too. So inside our data view, let's go ahead and move the code out here for this. You can see inside our struct data view, I have an observed object. Oh, observed object. Yeah, it has to be something that's observable. Oh, there's a reference to it. I know, silly. And what var is it? It's bucket store. So just a lowercase name of it, which is of type bucket store. And I'm going to initialize it right here so I don't have to have a custom init for my data view. So I can just build it right there. And so bucket store is a bucket's passing at bucket data, that variable that's inside that helper file, bucket data that we just saw earlier again here in the controller group, earlier here in the model group right here inside bucket data, that lowercase variable we have that we just took a look at a minute ago is where that's stored right there. Now, in order to make it so we can actually access those things, we have to be able to retrieve them out of that. And so we're going to use the built-in tool of a for each. This is one of the amazing things about Swift, and especially one of the really great things by switching from Swift using view controllers to using the SwiftUI style. We have these great built-in tools like the for each, where I can pass it a structure, in this case BucketStore.buckets, and for every bucket in that, I can simply create a bucket item cell, passing it the icon using a random generated emoji and a random string, and then getting the content of the bucket's goal, its author, and the bucket creature. So I can put that all the information right in there. So I can actually build that up together, and it can make it so I have everything right there. So I can read the data in from the file and then populate that file using that bucket store to have a reference for it, and we can make that happen. Let's go ahead and take a look to see how that works again really fast. So we'll go ahead and run this program again one more time. And so in that bucket store, you can see right here I have all those different items. I can scroll through this right here. And so I can scroll through it. Because they're embedded inside a navigation view, I can click on it, and that retains that information. There's that one copy of it right here. I can go back, and it's right back to that same thing, so I can have access to that and work with it. And so that's how we've actually made this app so it can function, read the data, have multiple instances of itself, and be going from there. So again, we're using this so we can actually take a look and work at that. Hope you have a great time in working on more applications and stuff using Swift and SwiftUI. Thanks again. Have a good day. Cheers.